how in 7 weeks Bitcoin ETFs reached inflows that took gold ETFs 3 years. So that right there. Now, we've talked about it before in the show. Max has talked about that, how Bitcoin will probably overtake gold. So it took gold, when the gold ETFs came in, it took them 3 years to get to this amount of money coming in. And it's done this in 7 weeks in Bitcoin. What does that tell you? So we've explained, like Max has explained on this show, there's $400 trillion in total global assets, right? You add up all of the global assets, right? That's everything. Everybody's bank savings account, gold, investment portfolio, stocks, pensions, all that, real estate, gold, all of it. You add all of it up, it's $400 trillion. Currently, Bitcoin is 1.4 trillion. I mean, a month or two ago, it was 1.3 trillion. So, and gold is $14 trillion. And the price of gold has been, there's not a lot of people pouring more money into gold. So what if people pull their money out of gold and put it into Bitcoin? That's a 14x, right? From the price we're at now, which puts us at just under $1 million a coin, which is why $1 million a coin is not outlandish. If people start, but even before we get into the $1 million a coin, let's just talk about if Bitcoin just starts to have 1% of global assets are in Bitcoin, which would be $4 trillion. So we would go from 1.3, 1.4 trillion in global assets to 4 trillion. That's roughly a 3x, right? So if we took 73,000 times 3, that puts us at 220, right? Which is that's not an outlandish number. So if these ETFs keep pouring in here, then if the ETFs keep pouring in here, getting to a 1% of global assets is not crazy. That's not crazy. So Eric Bauhaus of Bloomberg Intelligence explains why spot ETFs have made TradeFi a discrete sheet of 50. Okay, let's listen what this guy says.
Today's guest is Eric Balchunas, Senior ETF Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence.
Still can't hear?
Great to be here. How are you?
Good. It's an exciting week for Bitcoin. Monday will mark 2 months since the start of trading for the spot Bitcoin ETFs. And at the time of that launch, Bitcoin was trading at about 47,000 and it's now around 67,000. What do you think of the spot Bitcoin ETF performance during that time, and how did it compare to your expectations?
I thought it would take longer to have this sort of second wind. The second wind came faster and was more intense than I thought. I think we all expected some hype early, like the first couple of days. It was like a pressure valve that was built up for 11 years, and it finally released. Of course, there was going to be hoopla and some flows, and some volume, and there was. And then it kind of dipped down, and I thought, okay, we're going to get to this new normal of like maybe 50 to 75 million a day in flows, and maybe an outflow here and there, a little more normal. And GBTC's outflows had actually stabilized. So I thought, okay, we're going to enter this sort of more mild area. And then potentially down the road, as advisors get more interested, there could be a run up. Well, that happened in 2 weeks after I thought that. There was this clear second wave that came in, and not totally clear what caused it. I think it looked like IBIT in particular really was able to get volume. And I don't know if BlackRock's wholesalers were out doing their thing. It looks like they got a lot of asset managers to buy in. Retail has been very present in the ETFs. And so you saw a big run up in flows and volume, especially volume, in the past 2 weeks. And that's obviously caused an upward spiral. The flows come in, they have a nice impact on price, and they have a sentimental impact. I call it the ETF effect. If you know these flows are coming and you're not an ETF investor, you're probably going to go, well, this is probably bullish, I'll buy. So it's not just the ETFs lifting the price. There's an effect around it that's positive. And so I think that's what we're seeing. And so I've been in ETFs for about 20 years, and I call this the big come up. There's just certain times where something has its moment where it just rises quickly. Sometimes it's almost like a mania. Ark was probably the last one where the flows come fast and furious, the volume hits, and basically you get some FOMO, and that actually helps the price of the underlying go up too. And I think we're in that moment. I think it only happens once. After there's a long decline or a bear market, it's tough to have that feeling again. Bitcoin ETFs will always be around, just like gold ETFs are, but you only get this sort of like shining, like welcome to ETFs moment once where you break through. It's like an artist who has a first album that's a smash hit. You can definitely live on after that, but you only have that moment once, and we're in that moment. People should appreciate it. As an analyst, I love watching it. I think it's fascinating. I was glued to Ark mania when that happened. The Jets ETF was a little like that as well. And these ETFs don't make up a ton of the market share of the ETF pie, but they're so fascinating because they're punching way above their weight. Vanguard goes along. I wrote a book about Vanguard because I think they are just so big. But what else can you say, right? They take in a ton of money every day. They plod along. It's like the blob, and they take in the core of the portfolio. So these big companies, we know what they do. It's like old news. But when somebody comes from the outside and is able to go wild from like this far off area and sort of command the attention and a lot more flows than they're due, it's hard to take your eyes off of it. So I thought that I would be on to other things by now because I thought this was going to settle down and Bitcoin would be 10% of my life. But the second wind has me almost as engaged as during the approval because, again, just as the way I was engaged in other times, something broke through from the outside like this has.
And so when you kind of compare that to other moments when, you said that there have been a few other ETFs that had similar manias, but when you look at the Bitcoin one, like, is there anything that you would say is sort of particular to it or different about it?
Well, the big difference is it's all happening in funds that aren't even 2 months old. That's crazy. That's unprecedented. Like Ark was around for 4 years, and it invested in these sort of high growth, sort of future-y kind of companies. And that just happened to be.
So, that's one of the reasons why we're having such a big, we're not going to go into the whole interview, but you see how important this is, why people were like, boy, the Bitcoin ETF is going to be a big deal. But what is happening is it's happening much quicker than the gold one and the inflows. He thought this would be like, oh, we'd get a little spike from because we were, as she said, we were at 47,000 right when the ETFs launched, when they started. And then, we got a little pump and they thought it'd go up to maybe 60, 65, maybe come back down, kind of be living in the 50s. That's not happening. It just keeps going up. So that's one of the reasons we're at an all-time high right now of 73,000. We got close to 74 and since then today we've just been in 73, basically 72.9 back up. So